Hey there folks, I'm Mark, in affiliation with Spectrum Pulse, and it's Billboard Breakdown. I don't remember. Am I wrong to think that this week turned out surprisingly well? I mean, the worst case scenario is that we got a Sam Hunt album bomb and the collective quality and intelligence of the Hot 100 drops below sea level, but that didn't really happen. Instead, to my pleasant surprise, the album bomb we did get was from Rod Wave of all people, and given that I already reviewed and liked that album, makes the conversation that much easier. Now, of course, that doesn't directly apply to our top 10, where we do have a new number 1, and to many, what would be our biggest story, Toosie Slide by Drake debuting at number 1. Now, we'll get to talking about whatever nebulous quality the song has near the end of all this, but it's here thanks to big sales and on-demand streaming and the sort of frankly ridiculous radio push, but not really YouTube. That might be indicative of listeners not getting on board with the attempt at virality in the same way, but Drake does have the industry behind him, and watching how the song performs will say a lot about how much staying power he'll really have. Either way, it pushed back Blinding Lights by The Weeknd down to number 2, but I still think this is competitive. The airplay surge has not slowed down, still rules the radio, and the sales and streaming are still really goddamn strong. He's poised to push through if Toosie Slide falters. Now, I don't think the same holds true for The Box by Roddy Ricch at number 3. It's got the streaming and the radio, sure, but not the sales, and that YouTube margin is shrinking. Then there's Don't Start Now by Dua Lipa at number 4, which looks like it took a hit across the board, but not in a hugely significant way, and especially on the radio, it's got enough inertia to hold steady, at least for now. What it did hold steady, and probably shouldn't have, is Life is Good by Future featuring Drake at number 5, which thanks to a robust YouTube margin, consistent streaming, and stable radio held its position. Joy. Now, what also fell back was Circles by Post Malone to number 6, of which I'm not surprised. It's losing in all categories and will probably be sliding out of the top 10 sooner rather than later. It's been around a while. Next is Adore You by Harry Styles down to number 7, as it looked like the radio push hit a hard peak, telling given how relatively weak its sales and streaming are, which is not the case for Say So by Doja Cat falling back to number 8, which just had an excellent radio week. Again, even though it lost position, it didn't really lose strength. Sadly, also looks to be the case for Intentions by Justin Bieber featuring Quavo at number 9. He might have slightly more robust on-demand streaming and sales, but just not enough to compensate for Doja Cat's YouTube and radio push. And finally, Everything I Wanted by Billie Eilish is holding it at number 10, pretty much on wavering radio all week. Unfortunately, at this point, the song's just not built to get any higher. But this takes us to our losers and dropouts. And here's the thing, I would say that the Rod Wave album bomb caused damage here, but in truth it just knocked off a bunch of smaller songs and remnants of old album bombs, along with Whoa by Lil Baby. Ultimately a net positive. And I find it really hard to complain about our losers as a result too. Yes, Break My Heart by Dua Lipa took the step back to 39 off the debut, but so did Turks by Nav, Gunna, and Travis Scott at 46, and Believe It by Party Next Door and Rihanna at 58. Then we had the gains cut short for Lil Baby with Emotional Scarred falling down to 85, and a hit to Grace with 42 Doug at 100, along to sharp hits Woo After Hours by The Weeknd continuing down to 90, and Underdog by Alicia Keys getting down to 79. Told you that song didn't have momentum. And as for the rest of our losers, look, the best of them is probably You Should Be Sad by Halsey sliding down to 52 as it continues to underperform. Then we go to Suicidal by YNW Melly and the Late Juice WRLD at 43, or Homesick by Kane Brown fading to 48, or What She Wants Tonight by Luke Bryan dropping back to 62, or P2 by Lil Uzi Vert collapsing to 92, and most satisfyingly, Yummy by Justin Bieber at 94. The way this is going, it's gonna be a flop single and potentially not even a solid lock for the year-end list. If it gets there at all, it's going to be driven off the early success and maybe not anything else. But given this is also an album bomb week, we didn't see a lot of gains, and most of them I wasn't really enthralled by either. Catch by Brett Young up to 29 on the radio momentum, Deathbed by Powfu and Bia Badoobie bumped up to 33 thanks to some quiet streaming growth. Even more true for What's Poppin' by Jack Harlow up to 36. The only significant problems I can see are Hard to Forget by Sam Hunt getting the album boost to 40, gross. But the more worrisome song in my regard is If the World Was Ending by JP Saxe and Julia Michaels, picking up a slower boost to 83. In this day and age, that song was built to become a sleeper. I'd keep a wary eye on how quickly it slides up, because that's how it became a hit in other countries, and Sam Hunt does not have that sort of staying power. But on a different note, we did in fact get the album bomb from Rod Wave, the majority of which actually fell below the top 40. Now, if you want to see more of my opinions on the album, check out the last episode of On the Pulse on my main channel. But for individual songs, No Weakness hit 99, Thug Life hits 95, Ribbon in the Sky hit 84, The Greatest is at 78, Pray for Love is at 67, and Fuck the World is at 64. But anyway, on to our list of new arrivals, which minus the album bomb, it's a little bit more scarce, but you know what? Let's get things started with number 93, Here and Now by Kenny Chesney.
In this world tonight, you and me ain't it good to be alive. Ain't no better place, ain't no better time than...
I'll be honest, I'm legit shocked it took us this long to get a new Kenny Chesney single for the upcoming album on the Hot 100. Tip of my tongue dropped in the middle of the summer last year, and we're only now getting the follow-up for the album dropping in less than a month. Anyway, this is the newest song, and it's certainly got more of a fast-paced country rock vibe as he muses not in his past adventures or the uncertain future, but on the here and now. And look, outside of some questionable cymbal mixing, it's organic, actually pretty a propulsive song, but am I the only one who thinks that the hook just kind of lands on an odd note, and that the timing of this radio push feels kind of off for the climate? I mean, does anyone really want to be thinking most about living in the present right now? Just asking. Hell, you could argue it's focusing more on other times, because there's detail in the writing about those times, unlike the present. I don't know, I'm not gonna say this is bad, but it is very mid-tier Kenny Chesney, as he's definitely done better, even recently. Just okay, that's all. Number 81, Bluebird by Miranda Lambert. Well, I guess you had to push something from Wildcard after all. Granted, I think I'm in the minority of not really remembering nor caring about that last badly produced album, but here we go with Bluebird, and look, I'll repeat the same sentiments I had about the album, they're just as applicable here. The percussion feels clunky and doesn't match up with the blurry haze of electric guitars that don't drive the melody, thanks Jay Joyce. And while the mandolin strums feet texturing a lot of the song, especially leading into the final hook, they had potential until you slip in that quicker drum machine that doesn't match the vibe at all. It's frustrating because Miranda Lambert has proven she can handle this sort of dream country vibe thanks to the weight of these wings. This song, it's attempting something similar, but Jay Joyce has nowhere near the subtlety to deliver that, which unfortunately matches the writing way too well. And look, I appreciate the sentiment of always having more in the weight here, that she's gonna keep on evolving, she's gonna find a way out through her art, which if you're me and see that as metatext about a conflicted album release, it's a nice bit of abstraction. But Miranda Lambert is also a writer who can cut way more effectively even on the slow burns that are more metaphorical. And while she sounds pretty here, not gonna lie, she also sounds kind of checked out. Again, it's not bad, but man, it should be a lot better. Number 77, I Remember by Rod Wave.
How would I ever forget? How could I ever forget?
So there are two Rod Wave songs I want to highlight, and this is the first one, and let's blow through the quick structural issues. It's got two hooks, a single verse, a song with a melodic foundation this good, courtesy of the piano and that sweet guitar lick. Could have used a little bit more to work with, even with the pitch-shifted whistling coos behind him, but he makes a lot out of his one verse, reflecting on past losses, including the incarceration of his father, some lost friends, the uncle that would pull him off the streets, and all the betrayals of friends and lovers that still led him back to the streets, where even his mother will tell him from jail to get him to take some responsibility, just telling him off. It's a pretty bleak reminiscence, but it's sold well enough and Rod Wave keeps the mood consistent. In other words, this was a highlight of the album for me, so yeah, really strong stuff. Number 76, Tycoon by Future.
Throw the sheets, I'm going crazy. Got ballistics on my feet, they can't take me. I don't ain't gonna be the 6 to unlike 80.
I've stopped reading Future press releases, mostly because at this point I've got zero faith that he's going to deliver content that rises above the norm, and The Wizard from last year was absolutely a disappointment in that regard. And given that Life is Good has continued to get worse with every listen, I didn't expect anything with this, and it was probably the right idea, because once again we're stuck with a bassy slice of melancholy, with a barest melody and a swampy blur of guitars as Future muses through paranoia, gunplay, and brand name porn. Again, my big issue with Future at this point of his career is a lack of tuneful or interesting content, and Tycoon really is neither, especially with such monotonous delivery. Yes, Future's now saying he's off the lean in the first verse, but when you know that he hasn't done lean in years, I'm sorry, I stopped caring about the drama. Because really, it's just forgettable. Number 74, Thief in the Night by Rod Wave.
You can tell I've been here before. Before I go to sleep, I ask God for a miracle. Need help healing my soul.
So this also wound up as an album highlight for me. Yes, even despite the chipmunk fragments and the fluttery keys off the pretty standard trap beat and the underweight structure, and I will admit it's less detailed than I remember. But what I like about the song comes in some of the substance, the back and forth relationship that reflects the hard give and take to the streets. And as much as this girl hurt his feelings, she's gonna demand that heavier accountability, and when it ultimately doesn't work, she's gone and not coming back. And what hurts him all the more is knowing that it's inevitable, and it won't be the first time facing this sort of heartbreak, especially given where he is now, and that will also come with its own betrayals. And when you factor in how well Rod Wave is able to balance up his switch-ups on that verse, yeah, again, really solid song. I dig this. Check it out. Next up, number 71, Be a Light by Thomas Rhett, featuring Reba McEntire, Hillary Scott, Chris Tomlin, and Keith Urban.
Don't hide in the dark, you were born to shine in a world full of hate, be light.
So I've kind of danced around conversations about music released right now to inspire hope in the midst of a rough time of isolation, mostly because we're all in the thick of it, and if it helps someone, that's a net positive, especially if the sales money is going to charity. But I've always been kind of leery of charity singles as acts of quasi-self-promotion, and most of them don't tend to be all that good, so I had a lot of skepticism going into this cut from Thomas Rhett that he wrote last year, and then brought in Reba, Keith Urban, Hillary Scott of Lady Antebellum, and Chris Tomlin to cover. And he's most well known for making contemporary Christian music. I'm sorry, that just kind of raises some uncomfortable questions, especially given how the evangelical subculture in the United States has behaved in the midst of a pandemic, ignoring social distancing, and some megachurches still encouraging tithing. And when you got a song that's as underwritten and empty as this feels, beyond some vague, upbeat, and overproduced pablum how each person should be their own light, your mind kind of wanders to that place. And I kind of get why Thomas Rhett didn't release this last year. It's really undercooked in the composition, the production feels sterile, and unlike the truly potent charity collaborations, it just feels really forgettable. Really flimsy. Now again, if this brings you some sort of hope, some sort of happiness, I don't want to blunt that. It's not for me, that's fine. But when I can compare We Are the World positively to this, you may have slipped up. Just saying. Next up, number 22, Find My Way by DaBaby.
I be in my feelings. Every single person in my life tell me I'm the hero, but when it's up and then go down, it treat me like the feeling.
Hey, did you know that DaBaby's dropping an album this Friday? I mean, credit for taking advantage of the time, but I said this back when I was covering a lot of the Kirk album bomb. DaBaby could really run the risk of overexposure the way he's shoveling out material, and outside of isolated moments, he hasn't really shown the consistent evolution beyond a very tried and true formula to really wow me. Raw charisma can only take you so far. Now regardless, here's a new single, and is DaBaby singing here? Let me start off by saying he's not nearly as awkward doing so as I expected on the hook, especially given how blown out the bass rumble is and swamping out those guitars, which actually is the same sample as FRINDS by Marshmello and Amber Ray of all things, until you get to the last two lines of the verse and he slides offbeat trying to croon, and suddenly all my usual issues with DaBaby DaBaby, barely being on beat, are back at the forefront. Now again, it's not precisely a bad lane for him, showing a little more vulnerability as she gives him some relief from all of his responsibilities, but of course he can't stay in that territory, so of course she's someone who didn't level up like him, and he wants to screw both her and her friend, and I'm sorry, it's just tiresome to see him creeping up towards improvement and then never really getting there. Yeah, sure, it's catchy, but if DaBaby thinks this is evolution, no, I'm sorry. Can't say I'm all that impressed. And finally, number 1, Toosie Slide by Drake.
For a slide. Basically, I'm saying either way, we bout to slide. Hey, can't let this one slide. Hey.
You'd think after Nice for What, Drake would have stopped. Seriously, I had no belief he could top that in terms of dance songs, so why in the nine hells is he making and releasing this now? Beyond the obvious, I might as well monopolize the cultural conversation, all the TikTok videos, because what else are people gonna do? And Drake's absolutely been tacky with his dance challenges before, but even at his worst, he sounded like he kinda cared. One dance, for as badly produced and faintly embarrassing as it was, it's more interesting and catchy than this failed drone experiment with its self-referential, half-formed verses, the very standard trap beat, and all the faded synths and a post-chorus that kills any sense of momentum. And the assertions that this is too deep for us, it's nonsense. He's trying to spin his usual paranoia into winning over this girl in the first verse, and the second verse seems like an undercooked warning where he talks about all the pressure he is putting on himself. And you think that if that was true, he'd actually be saying something on the damn song. There'd be something to it. This doesn't even feel new or mimetic in an interesting way, which also kind of gives me the feeling this could fall off really fast. And while he's got the industry on his side built to make this a hit, doesn't guarantee it's going to be a sustainable one. Just saying. But also, yeah, it sucks. It's by far the worst of the week. But dishonorable mention going to Be a Light by Thomas, Rhett, and crew for being the worst sort of milquetoast charity record. And when you have as much talent as this one did, that's a big problem. And the individualist angle of the song kind of rubs me the wrong way, just saying. Now, the best of the week are both going to Rod Wave, with I Remember as the easy standout, but Thief in the Night is right behind him. Now, the next week, I mean, it's too early for the DaBaby album bomb to come. Maybe another cool down on the charts, who knows? But until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Billboard Breakdown, affiliated with Spectrum Pulse. And I'll